How are people experiencing your efforts? How are customers experiencing your efforts? How are employees experiencing your efforts? In other words, what is their perception? You may think you're good enough. You may think you're powerful. You may think you're awesome. And you probably are. But you must also ask, Wilfredo Federico Damaso Pareto. That is the name of the fellow who postulated the Pareto Principle. In essence, the principle postulates that 20% of your efforts are yielding 80% of your results. Now, of course, this is not necessarily absolutely mathematical, but the point is the quantity of your efforts that really make sense in terms of desirable outcomes are a fraction of the totality of what you are doing, of what you are spending time, energy doing. Now, the flow of work or the flow of value can be articulated with three simple words: efforts, outputs, outcomes. Efforts represent the energy you are putting in to what you are trying to do, whether you are a career professional or an emerging entrepreneur. Your efforts are your 8 to 5 every single day of the week, 40 hours a week. And you will agree with me that you don't even need a principle to let you know that many of the things you are involved in are not yielding desirable outcomes. Now, when you look at efforts, that energy you put in, it yields something. It yields an output. It could be an email, it could be a presentation, it could be a document that you produce, it could be a model, right? If you're an emerging entrepreneur, it could be all the hours you spent making a video like this. That is an outcome. The video is an outcome. The file is an outcome. The model is an outcome. It is a representation or a result of your effort. But that is not necessarily the eventual result that you want. The eventual result that you want is the outcome. The intent of your original, or the original intent of your effort, why you took the journey of making an effort, what it eventually turns out to produce for you. For example, a marketing effort, the result or the desirable outcome of a marketing effort is not likes and shares, it is sales, right? The desirable result of a process document is not the document itself, it is streamlined processes in your organization and so forth. So the point is that flow of value from efforts to outputs to outcomes is important to keep one's eye at the last stage of outcomes and measure using that Pareto principle. What 20% of my efforts are yielding 80% of my outcomes? So how do you do this? I'm going to share a thought about that. And the thought I'm sharing, I'm using an acronym. I'm using an abbreviation, not because it's an established framework per se, but because it probably is easier to remember. I'm going to say it in terms of ARF. A means assessment. Assessment is understand the problem you are trying to solve and understand the context in which you are trying to solve that problem. Taking time to understand, helps you remove the risk of unproductive work, remove the risk of chaff in your outcomes, if I may say that. So you want to really assess, you want to think about, what are we trying to accomplish here? In what context are we trying to accomplish it? Who is going to consume the outputs and the outcomes of this effort, and so forth? So you do an assessment. You cannot change what you do not understand. You cannot change effectively what you do not understand. So the second stage of it is reflect. And for a career professional, that could be a weekly habit to sit back and think about the past 40 hours of your life. And I want to tell you something about time. It is irrecoverable, right? It is the most precious commodity in the universe. So what we spend our time doing is critical, because we are actually spending our lives. So when you look at reflection, it's about asking, which of my efforts are yielding the most desirable outcomes? Which of my efforts these past weeks have yielded the desirable outcomes? So it's an objective thing, objective questions we ask ourselves. What is really working, right? What is really creating desirable outcomes? We are not in control of the outcomes per se, so we must touch on those factors, internal and external, that influence the outcomes that we desire, and then focus on amplifying those that are yielding or generating the desirable outcome. So reflection. Your third is feedback, and this is a vital gift you can get from those around you. Ask questions about their experience of your efforts. How are people experiencing your efforts? How are customers experiencing your efforts? How are employees experiencing your efforts? In other words, what is their perception? You may think you're good enough. You may think you're powerful. You may think you're awesome, and you probably are. But you must also ask, how am I being perceived? Because that also contributes to the overall outcome of your efforts, right? So think about it. Assessment, reflection, feedback. Assessment, reflection, feedback. Make this your routine and become a more effective person.